you that loch looks very different in the winter time down there, Tom.
Oh, it does, aye. I've walked over it, in fact, in the winter.
Is that so?
Yes, I have, and in a blizzard, and I didn't know I was on it until I got to the far side.
About how thick has ice got to be before it will bear you on a loch like that? 4 inches, Weir, 5?
Oh, well, I couldn't really say,
No.
but I know this, that it was a very, very hard spell, and it was a very wild blizzard, and I was really quite surprised to find myself at the end. Well, we're coming to a wee steep bit here,
Right,
isn't it?
steep down or steep up? That's the important question, Tom.
It's down, and there's a few routes, so you just pick your steps
but
here.
these roots are deadly when there's moisture on them, aren't
there
they?
is.
They're very easy to skate.
That's it now.
But this is where the big stick comes in, Tom. If I go to one side, I can put the weight on the stick, you see. Down we go.
Aye, well, we just pause there, Sid, because here's a tremendous view. Now, I'm seeing it probably as well as I've ever seen it before. And this wee boat that's doing the fishing is just coming into view now.
Oh, yes.
And behind it, that wee crag I was telling you about with the steep nose on it. And behind that, the ridge that goes to Glen Feshy. And the loch is absolutely placid and catching the clouds, yes,
So you're getting
in front of us. And behind it, the castle, and behind that again, the peak of Cairngorm. How did you come to lose your sight in your legs?
This is such a long time ago, I've nearly forgotten, Tom. But it was actually with the Lovat Scouts in Italy a fortnight before the end of the war. And we were patrolling, and I stood on a shoe mine, and that was the left foot away, and that was the eyesight gone. What? For good. Funnily enough, I knew right from the start. You know, the boys said, "Are you feeling all right?" I said, "I feel okay, but I think I've lost the sight of my eyes." Wasn't that strange? I knew instantly that they were gone. So I finished up in hospital down in Naples. And curious enough, many, many years later, I must have been lying in bed thinking about the hills with the eyes shut and wrapped in bandages. 20 years later, a lassie, May McFarlane, turned up at the house and she said, "You remember me?" I said, "Yeah." We had a chat about the Larry Grew in the hills when I was in hospital. She said, "You said something then I've always remembered." I said, "What?" She said, "You said, I can do without my eyes, but I can't do without my mountains." And isn't it funny how the last 25 or 30 years I've been busy resolving that queer paradox, because I've got back the hills again in that different way related to not being able to see them, Tom, as opposed to being able to see them. Huh?
And I also remember that when you were determined to come back to the hills, you put an advert in the paper. You remember that bit?
Well, there were some odd bits about tent-trained yetis and no guide dogs need apply and no wages and endless hours and union labour not required and all the rest of it. But it never actually got into the paper because someone I didn't know working in the office, it was passed around the office as a kind of a literary curiosity. He phoned up, I said, "Who is that?" He said, "Bob McLean." He said, "Did you put that advertisement in the paper looking for a pal?" I said, "Yes." "Well," he said, "if you're daft enough to want to go to the hills, Scroggie, I'm daft enough to want to come with you." And I had some wonderful ploys with McLean in the early days of what might be called my blind career in the hills, Tom. What?
But your first trip with him was in the winter time.
It was a winter trip, that's right. That's when he found himself with his head pillowed on my frozen tin leg in the middle of the night in the tent in the snows up in Bachnagairn. They were all great trips with McLean. They were all wild and woolly trips. He was the kind of guy who was so taken up with thinking about the magic of the hills that he would sit me down on a boulder and then he'd get up and just walk away and forget that I was there. And I just let him go and whistled after him after a while, Tom. You come back again, eh?
But I think that first trip to Carrower must have been a real milestone.
Oh, Carrower, Bothy. It's about 6 or 7 miles, isn't it, Tom, from Derry Lodge over the shoulder of Carnarvon and drop down to Carrower, Bothy. I didn't know, you see, at that time, 1955, that I would have the strength and stamina. And it was the old wooden leg at that time, and I'd never carried a rucksack since the war, and we set off, and that was the longest, hardest, toughest 6 or 7 miles I ever did in my life, because it was the psychology of the thing. And neither of us thought we could make it, but we got there. We had our night in the bothy with the stove going and the eggs and bacon frying and the lovely smell of wood smoke from the bog stumps in the fire. And next day it seemed the easiest thing in the world to come back over that same bouldery track, because by this time, Tom, you knew you could do it.
Well, can you remember the poem that you wrote celebrating that event?
Oh, well, it started off actually rather badly with a colossal clap of thunder and a flash of lightning, and that comes into the poem. It went something like this: 17 years since last I saw Carrower, or trod the track that turns through antique pines, that rough red track where Jussican appears, the Devil's Point and Vrotton's dark-etched lines. And well I saw him then, that other me, him of the stalker's eye, the athlete's leg, wavered in much in hill's pure constancy, myself when young, a mile from Louis Beg. Small wonder that the lightning flashed that day, and thunder loud on crag and cornice rolled and boomed and snarled and grumbling died away. The gods thus spoke, the gods of hill and glen. This is our man, we know his face of old. He has but slept, behold, he comes again. Not bad for a beginner, Tom.
Aye, and again and again.
And again and again. In fact, we keep a log at home of all the trips and blind trips, whether day trips, weekend trips, 3-day trips, 10-day trips. They're getting on for 600 over the years, Tom, and we keep a log of them. Must have travelled tens and tens of thousands of miles, and yet I have never damaged my good ankle, Tom. Benefit of the stick, you see. It can take the sudden weight and take the pressure off your ankle.
Did you ever lose the leg, though, the tin leg?
Well, as on one occasion, the foot fell off it. The foot fell off it right in the middle of the wilds, and my pal turned away back. I'll get help, said he. When he came back, he said, you know, when I left you, you were all alone up here with a blue sky and flakes of snow coming down. He said, have you not heard them? There are 6 hoodie crows circling around you. They know. They gather, Tom, don't they? Eh? Oh, you can't get away. They can smell a mishap, can't they? And gather in one. Eh?
Well, I think we'll have another wee ramble along and I'll hear the rest of the story as we go.
You think so? All right, Tom.
It's dulling down a bit, so I think we should get the walk as quickly as we can. Eh?
I notice the sun's off my face, Tom. I'm not feeling it any longer.
I'll just sling on my rucksack, because you like to get your hand into it, don't you?
I do indeed, yes,
right.
Tom.
Okay.
You've got all the light. You've got all the light stuff, and I've got all the heavy stuff. I know. That's an old one.
Yes, that's right.
How's that?
Fine, sir.
That sack of yours has got a bit of a history, Tom.
So this is where the view of the loch really opens up, because now we've got everything rolling away to the Spey Valley.
Is that so?
Aye, so you see how the trees encircle it, the big hills rise from it, and just on the right is a cottage that looks over it all. And it must be one of the most finely situated cottages in Scotland.
It's absolutely magnificent. Tell me, is it an old-fashioned stone-built, slate-roofed cottage?
Oh, yes, it's an old cottage that's been done up. It lay empty for years, 20 years or more.
What's the next item on the programme?
Well, we've now come into some heavy cover now. In that we've got Caledonian pines on each side of us.
Okay.
There's no view of the loch now.
Okay.
But this will take us to the most delightful little glen. And I don't think you've been into this particular one.
Has it got a name, Tom?
Well,
just the wee glen?
Well, it's really the introduction to the Inchriach part of the forest. You know, Sid, walking with you, I don't get the feeling that you're handicapped at all, because your memory is so good. I feel you're seeing things.
My trouble is nobody's ever thought of me as a blind man. I've never got any sympathy, Tom. When you get blinded, first of all, you start on a kind of a high. It's a new experience, you see. Then you hit a low and you're a bit depressed, and then you claw your way back again. And after that, you're okay. During this period, I was down with St. Dunstan's, you see. Now, St. Dunstan's is a great organisation. We're all blinded.
How did St. Dunstan's help, Sid?
Well, I suppose it's based on its a kind of implicit motto, Tom. This blindness of yours, Scroggie, don't think of it as a handicap. Think of it as an opportunity. The late Chairman Ian Fraser put it to me this way. He said, we teach you to read, we teach you to write, and we get you a job. After that, it's up to you. You're not put into a ghetto, do you know what I mean, Tom? Mm-hmm. The idea is to get you out into the wide world and make your own living in the sighted community, which is the best thing that can happen to anybody with any handicap. Be shoved in at the deep end, Tom, huh?
Mm-hmm. Sid,
yeah.
We've just stopped here at a very good point. I must describe it to you, because I know how much you love these gnarled old pines.
Gnarled old pines.
And there's some of the best in the Cairngorms here,
Dark
and growing under them, junipers.
And the junipers. The dark needles, Tom, I seem to remember from the days when I could see. Very dark needles, the Scots pine have.
Yes.
Are these the old ones? They're not newly planted ones?
No, I imagine these are hundreds of years old.
Hundreds of years old.
And the juniper below them, of course, quite good flourishing juniper, not the dwarf stuff.
Juniper is a kind of a bushy thing, isn't it, Tom?
That's right. It's a very tight, bushy...
A very tight,
They say there's not much feeding in it, but it's very good shelter for beasts in the winter time.
Aye. This is a great place for the juniper growing, isn't it? All over the Cairngorms, if it's given half a chance.
Yes.
Isn't that right, Tom?
Well, it's natural to the old forest, just like that ground cover that you get at the Blaeberry and so on. What do you think the longest walk that you've done since you were blind has been, Sid?
Oh, I think I can remember that one all right. We managed 40 miles, Tom, in one day. That was from Aviemore over there through the Larry Grew, the big pass, down to the Brimar side. And the next day away down Glen Calatar and away up Cairn Taggart and away over to the top of the Broad Cairn. Sat up there in the door of the hut 3,000 feet while the shadows of evening came on, and dropped down at Bachnagearn and away down to Clover. And that's the longest 2 days I ever did, Tom. Huh?
And what was the total mileage?
Good 40.
And what about the amount of feet climbed?
Well, you had to go up to 2733 going over the Larrig and drop down to 1,000, and then get up to your 3,000 feet again next day and drop down to 800 in the Glen or something like that. So, and nothing went wrong, provided you don't get stump trouble with the tin leg, you see, Tom. You're all right. You can keep going forever.
Just swing round, you'll get a seat here.
Good. If you begin to get a chafe or something, what do we sit round? Right on the ground?
Yeah, no, there's a log there.
A log?
A log there, that's it.
There you go.
If you just feel it there, you'll get
got it.
But if you just go over a wee bit, there's a better bit for sitting on.
Over here.
Aye, that's it, just about there.
It's a very rough old... This has been lying here for a while, Tom.
It's just made for you, Sid.
This has been lying here for a long time.
And me.
It didn't know what its destiny was, did it?
Well, that was 40 miles.
In a couple of days.
Probably getting up for 4,000 feet of climbing.
Correct. And
it's a speed which a sighted man would be glad to
well, I suppose
cover.
Really over really bouldery rough ground, it gets me down to about a quarter of a mile an hour. But give me half decent footing and we can get up to 3 or 4 miles an hour, Tom. That's when I was in my prime. I'm over the hill now, huh?
But you're saying you're prime, but still with one leg and blindness. But this is what strikes me, Sid, about your enthusiasm. I mean, I could understand it if you were getting a great deal from it, such as, say, myself. But you've been keeping at it for 25, 30 years.
Which indicates in itself that there is something very, very important at stake. You get from your experience in the hills, which includes the seeing side, the visual side, all that keeps you going. But I argue that it's not the visual side which is really important in that kind of thing, trekking in the wilds, climbing hills. spending nights under boulders and in tents and in bothies, it's an inner psychological thing. It's not really you against you. You set yourself an objective and you say, I'm going to get there if I possibly can, come hell or high water. And there's a wonderful feeling of achievement, the sort of a feeling of achievement my daughter Mary gets when she finishes a marathon in half-decent time. Do you know what I mean, Tom? That comes into it. Oh, but there's far, far more. The whole thing about the hills, and you would be the first to agree, is an element which could only be called poetic. It's not a commando exercise, Tom, although hard work comes into it. I argue that everybody who goes to the hills is a natural poet. It's something to do with the beauty, something to do with the silence, something to do with being absolutely in touch with what might, for want of another phrase, be called Mother Nature, away from the artificiality of towns. And you kind of tend to find yourself in some kind of inner way in that environment. Isn't that your point of view as much as it is mine, Tom?
Well, it is, but at the same time, for me, everything's there. I can see the burns, I can hear the birds, see the birds, the mist moving over the tops of the hills, enjoy the view, watch the clouds forming, reforming. But you can't get that.
Yes, I can't get it now, but you see, in the days when I could see, Tom, I stored up a million hill images, and when you mention mist on a hill, I can see a mist, not on one hill, but on innumerable hills, under innumerable different circumstances of colour or time of day. I can think of mist lying in the corrie and the first golden rays of the sun striking it and changing it to a brilliant colour. All these images are filed away. I sit on this log here. I know what that log looks like because I have images relating to the rugged bark of this old bit of Scots pine we're sitting on and all that kind of thing. What it would be like to have been born blind and have a career in the hills, I cannot possibly imagine, Tom. Well,
I was going to ask you something, Sid. Do you dream a lot?
Yes, I have a lot of good fun in dreams, many adventures. I have some dreams which are so delightful and charming that I'd rather go to sleep again when I wake up to get the next thing forward.
So you can see then when you dream?
I can see in dreams, and it's a rather curious thing. First of all, I dream more vividly in colour since I was blinded. I used to dream in monochrome, but now I dream in vivid colours, and also I'm in a rather peculiar position in dreams because I feel slightly guilty because I'm neither blind nor can I see. I can see the images in dreams, but I have a kind of a feeling I oughtn't to be able to because I'm really blind, and I feel a kind of a sham, Tom. Do you know what I mean? What?
Well,
I'll dream I'm driving cars. I have wonderful times playing rugby matches in dreams and scoring tries and all that kind of stuff, Tom. What?
Well, Sid, I think we should move before the midges eat us because they're getting bad.
Well, I can feel one in my right ear, Tom. And there's only two alternatives with the midges.
Aye, aye. There we are.
You either tolerate them or you go insane.
Oh, well, we'll move.
We'll move, I think. Because they're what?
There's a wee bothy here, Sid. I know your love of bothies.
No, bothy.
We haven't really time to go into it, but we'll see it. It's a grand wee bothy, which we'll spend the night in another time. The countryside's a bit more open now. Right behind us are the outliers of Scroggie. These wee knobbles that lie above Glenfeshie.
I remember that. It looms over Gleneinic on the other side, doesn't it, Tom?
It does, and great rock buttresses.
Great rock buttresses.
But here is a rather heathery bit, and then beyond that starts the new forest. So we're just about to cross the burn, Sid.
What is it, a wooden bridge?
Well, it's just a wooden bridge.
Could you take a cuddy with a stag over it, over his back over here?
Sure you could, and you could take a Land Rover,
take a Land Rover?
too.
Oh, well, I don't think we have any worries then, Tom. That one's not going to collapse under us one. I hear the water running underneath it. Everything's pretty full just now. There's been a lot of rain.
Oh, been a lot of rain. And I think more's coming because although we had a marvellous morning, it's now clouding over.
Well, Tom, where have we got to now?
Well, we're in a very heathery bit and a sort of boggy bit too because there's a big peat hag there. It's really a wee loch, I think, that dries out occasionally. But at the moment, I think you would drown in it if you went in.
It would take you more than up to the knees, Tom, would it?
I'm sure it would. And there's a lot of old skeleton pines in the old grannies, you know.
What the old boys called grannies, the wee bits of the pine trees.
Roots that'll be hundreds of years old.
Very good for burning in a bothy fire, Tom.
The best. And away to the west, we're looking towards the Northern Hills, and the rain is coming from them. You can see, in fact, it's advancing. colder now, Sid.
Aye, I'm feeling it in my hands, actually,
Well, I was
Tom.
thinking it's time you put on your grovit.
Aye, it's driven the midges away, though. Aye.
Well, there's something here, Sid, as well as a notice saying fire danger, Cairngorm National Nature
That
Reserve.
sounds very impressive, Tom.
And this is where we leave
Is
it.
this where we come out of it now?
Uh-huh.
So it's a jolly good idea to have these reservations, Tom.
And we're now on a pucker track
Ah.
that'll take us to the Spey Valley.
We're
Well, it's
on-
been a great walk, Sid.
Great ploy, Tom.
And we'll do
Great
a harder
ploy.
one the next time, eh?
You see, all these trips in the hills, they're all different, but they're all equally good, aren't they, Tom?
Oh,
What?
right,
You can't say one's better than the other.